Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lords of Limited. My name is Ben Warney, and joining me on the line, as always, the Jack of Junk, the Sultan of Slop, the Lord of Ley Lines, Mr. Ethan Sachs. What's it like to not be able to open good raiders in this format?
You know what it's what's very interesting about how you have chosen to engage with me on this topic is like I feel like if the roles were reversed, I'd be like, man, that stinks. Like, I'm sorry. And what you choose to do is like needle me about something that is not within my control. Like you're like, man, the packs you open are really bad. I'm like, yeah, I know. What am I supposed? It's something I can do about it.
That's what good friends do, right? They cheer for their friend's sports team to lose and then rub it in their face.
Oh my gosh. This is it's not the world, not the world I live in. Look, I'm making do. It's week 2. You know, we chatted last week. We talked about being on different sides of perhaps variants, opening packs. I'm now convinced this is not variants and this is just what the format is.
And you think I'm running hot?
Is you just open like ley lines and lands and, you know, unplayable or medium C grade rares. And then you just make do with the rest of the slop in the pack, as you said. And I got to say, I'm still having a great time. This format is still delivering on week 2.
Yeah, this format is excellent, but I do feel like we are experiencing the format very differently, which is a testament to how deep this format is. I think it is very deep. There's tons of cross synergy. There's tons of ways to build every archetype, because the thing that's cool about the format that we're going to get into in the episode is the good cards push you in directions, and depending on which good cards you see, you get pushed in a direction, and then trying to combine directions or have a main direction and a sub direction. All of that is really cool about the format.
Or you don't open sweet cards and you have to forge your own direction from the red cards that you see, which is what I do every draft.
You're just taking a machete and chopping through the underbrush.
I don't know what else to do. I mean, truly, like I feel like I've been burned a few times from like trying to draft some things. Like, here's an oblivious bookworm. Let me try the manifest. Nope. 1, 2. You're bad. Don't do this. So, and I pass like so many good red cards that I'm like, I'll just keep drafting the 4 red decks and be happy.
You truly are manifesting your own destiny. Love to see it.
Truly am. So yeah, we are going to continue to talk about the two sides of this coin of the format of Duskmourn that we're experiencing this week. Talk about just sort of like what questions to be asking as you're drafting and how to like maximize the things that you're seeing, whether they are excellent rares or whatever, if you're in Ben's seat, or if they're, you know, the dregs of commons, and if you're in my seat. And we'll have a draft log to take a look at, and I'm excited to talk to you about a deck that I feel like I've figured out finally, which is Rakdos. And we'll talk about that at the end of the episode. So first things first, let's get into the Patreon page. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show. We have some sweet perks over at the Patreon page. The base level, what everybody gets access to via the Patreon right now, is the Lords of Limited Discord. And we have an arena open coming up this weekend. So this weekend coming up, that's going to be October 12th and 13th. So if you're going to be hopping in, firing a couple bullets, you want some folks to take a peek at your sealed pool, there's no better time to get in on the Discord than for an arena open, to be able to share your sealed pool, get some feedback there, share your success, wallow in your failures with other people, whatever you want to do. The Lords of Limited Discord has your back. And we have some other great perks as you move up the reward tier rankings, like access to the episode a day early, ad-free, access to some show notes, access to a private section of our Discord, all of that available at patreon.com. And we want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they joined. So this week we're welcoming William, Mayhem-esque, Peter, and Onik, who even made good on joining the Patreon despite you not trophying with that deck on Twitter. Thank you to all of you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough. What is the name of that rare? It's the 5/5 flyer that manifests dread on your opponent's turn.
Abhorrent Oculus.
Abhorrent Oculus. I opened Abhorrent Oculus, and as per we were talking about earlier, sent a screenshot to Ethan, and I was like, it's easy. Just open good rares. And someone on Twitter posted, if you 3-0 with this, I'm joining the Patreon. Well, things went a little awry in the draft because I keep opening good rares and they just want to do cool things. So I drafted a 5-color 47 card monstrosity, and it didn't work out great. I O2 dropped in a blaze of glory, but Onik was kind enough to subscribe anyway, so I appreciate it.
I just can't believe that like you get gifted one of the best rares in the set. Just pack one, pick one. You don't even have to see it like pick 3 or pack 3 after you're like, well, I'm in red black, and then you open a blue rare. Like, you just have it there and you're like, let me squander this as best as I possibly can.
Listen, I'm telling you, I probably, there's got to be some room in the middle, but there are just good rares in this format. We just need our listeners to tweet screenshots of good
The,
rares at you. That's what we need. Or just
the,
post them in the
the thing is,
Discord,
though,
tag Ethan.
no, I don't need that. But because I will say, but so far, all of the feedback we've gotten from our YouTube comments. Love the people commenting on YouTube on the episodes. There's no one who's like, hashtag I'm with Ben. I'm opening so many great rares. Everyone is like, yep, Ethan, that's my experience. Ley line after ley line. So I gotta say, I think you might be alone there. But let's talk about where we're at, because I think we're, despite having different experiences of what we're opening, I think having similar feelings about what the format has to offer and how you want to maximize those things.
Yeah, I think certainly one of the reasons I'm enjoying this format a ton is that it's a synergy-driven format. Those are definitely my favorite formats, where you have room to pull up the average value of your card quite a bit in your deck. And I think in this format, getting all of your cards to pull in the same direction while still being able to pack interaction for your opponent is the name of the game. And certainly something like Glassworks, the 2 and a red, deal 4, that can be a synergistic piece for you while also interacting with your opponent. Those types of cards, just absolutely premium. Same reason that Trapped in the Tower is also insane, because it's interaction plus a synergy piece for blue-white eerie triggers, for example.
Yeah, I think, as we'll talk about a little later, Red Black is a deck I'm really excited about this week. And Final Vengeance is a perfect example of that. The single black sorcery as an additional cost to cast it, sack a creature and enchantment, and you get to exile target creature. Exile being huge on that card as well. But the fact that that is not only a cheap way to just get something gone for good, it's also synergizing, right? You're sacrificing a Disturbing Mirth. You're sacrificing a Clockwork Percussionist to draw a card, a Fear of Lost Teeth to ping something down. Like, that kind of synergistic thing that you get to do while also interacting is huge. And I just want to just clarify the word synergy here, because I feel like formats are synergistic in a way, like just in general. Like Bloomborough, you could say, was synergistic, right? You have like things happening. There's a thing you're trying to do, and it's like column A plus B. I think what you're talking about here with synergy in Duskmourn is a bit more broad, that like, depending on what you are going down, what path you're going down, cards stock rise and fall based on where you think you're going to end up. And it's a lot more flexible than just, I am an Otters deck, so I want spells, or I am a Rats deck, so I want Threshold, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's much less hand-holdy. Like, there are no guardrails at the bowling lane. We are bowling, and you can throw some gutter balls in this format if you don't build your decks right. And that was pretty hard to do in Bloomborough. Like, if you put the appropriate colored cards together, generally your deck did a thing. That is definitely not true in this format. And I think that's why I appreciate this format, and also why there are tons of different ways to build each color pair. You can build a straight blue-red Rims deck that's like a true late game control deck. And I think that rarely comes together well, but when it does, it is absolutely phenomenal. And I think that was what we had the experience with in early access, why we came in so hot on Rims. And Rims, just again, as a card type, truly excellent. But that deck, narrow but very powerful. But then you can also have a heavier red deck where the blue plays a tempo support role. Like, there's just tons of knobs to tweak. You can be blue-green Manifest Destiny. You can be heavier Manifest Dread. Don't shake your head at me. That was genuine. I'm sorry.
I know it was.
It's deep in the brain. But I just recently drafted a Sultai deck that was more eerie focused, and kind of green was tying the room together for the mana base. There's just so many cool things to do depending on which good cards you have and what your good cards are asking you to do.
Yeah, totally agree.
Another great example of that is Red-Green, which I've been playing more of recently, and I didn't feel like I got it. And it can range from beatdown, which is what I didn't like, but you can also build Red-Green very late game oriented if you get, again, good rares or the green delirium cards. But one of the things that red is great at, if you pair red and green together, it's trivially easy to get artifact creatures and creatures. And those creatures with 2 types make it so easy to turn on delirium. Like, I thought red green wasn't interested in say its name, but I think it really, really, really is, unless you are hyper aggro. And I think that's the less good version of the deck, or the deck I prefer to play less overall. I really have started valuing, once I'm in the delirium space, say its name, or just cards that do dump things into the graveyard for you.
Yeah. I unsurprisingly, as the other side of the coin here, the red green decks that I have played the most have been red green beats, and I think that deck has legs. It's a lot more red based than green based, but we were talking about, like, it is pretty trivially easy if you're thinking about it in the draft. And that's one of the things that's so fun about the draft is, like, if you are at all interested in delirium, which a lot of decks are in some capacity, there is an interesting puzzle of, like, do I take a slight hit in power level to grab this artifact creature, right? Am I playing that stupid 2-mana 2/2 artifact that dies and both player draws a card? Like, that sort of thing is a really fun puzzle. Am I going to play the 3-mana 4/2 in green that's an enchantment creature? That sort of thing. Like, those kinds of puzzles of what pieces you want to put in your deck, I think are pretty sweet. But the red based delirium aggro decks that I've played have really liked being able to ambush cheaply with Manifest Dread. So I'm thinking specifically of the 2 and a green 5/4 enchantment creature that you can tap to it. You have to tap 2 additional things when you cast it, but that's incredible to flip up as a 3-mana 5/4. I fortunately had the opportunity to draft a good rare Tyvar the other day, and
That card is outstanding.
ended up in red green beats with Tyvar, and that's another card that's just great to flip up. And that's a deck I feel like where, I haven't really had the opportunity to do the thing that you were talking about last week with Manifest Dread. I hadn't really gotten a chance to do until this week, of having good rares and just feeling that velocity towards, like, every time you Manifest Dread, you're looking at 2 fresh cards. One of them could be that bomb creature that you have and you want to flip up. And Tyvar is a great one because it's so cheap to flip up. I do feel like there are diminishing returns. That's why I like those 3-mana cards that you can flip up that are impactful are really nice.
Yeah, and so when you're playing red green, do you feel like you want say its name if you're playing the aggro version?
I feel like Manifest Dread does a similar job in terms of filling my graveyard with types, and I'm less concerned about getting something specific back, and it affects the board / like plays well with the bombs I have if I have them. So I feel like in the red green beats deck, I would rather have Manifest Dread than say its name as that, like, 2-drop delirium enabler.
But that's the cool part about this format, right? Is
Yeah.
that deck, like, a color pair could potentially really want say its name, or be like, maybe I'll run a copy, or maybe not, like, whatever, That's interesting to me.
Yeah, for sure.
This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Can you think of a time recently when you didn't feel like you could be your full self, like you were hiding behind a mask?
I definitely have that, but I also feel like I do the opposite sometimes too, where I decide I'm not willing to compromise who I am or how I want to behave in a certain setting because, like, that's me being authentic, when actually calibrating for a specific situation would just serve me and those around me better. So I feel like I got both sides of the coin there.
October is the season for wearing masks and costumes, but some of us feel like we wear a mask and hide more often than we want to, at work, in social settings, or around our family.
Therapy can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so you can leave the masks for Halloween and not for your emotions.
If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule.
Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge.
Take off the mask with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lords today to get 10% off your first month.
That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lords. And now, back to the show.
And I think another thing that is a boon to this format, kind of along the same vein, is, with the exception of basically green-white survival, like, I don't love that. It's fine. You can do it. But generally, if you follow where the cards tell you to go, you're not going to be led astray, I think, for the most part. Like, I built around Cursed Recording this week, and it was broken in half. So Cursed Recording is the 2 red, and you can tap it to have your next instant or sorcery that you cast doubled, but you can only do it 7 times. On the 7th time, you deal 20 damage to yourself. The TV blows up, and this is like The Ring, right? You have 7 days to live or something. Isn't that a movie?
Yes, that is a movie.
Okay. But I think it's important to think about it as following cards and not following the archetype prescriptions from Wizards of the Coast so much. Certainly in the green decks, especially. But I think that could even be true in white red or white blue. But, blue black Eerie, like that's not very helpful for drafting the format well. Black red Sacrifice, I guess, is. Green black Delirium, kind of. But there's so many variations of each color pair that I think if you, rather than trying to follow the prescribed guidelines, if you can identify the good cards and follow what those good cards ask you to do, I think that is the way to have success in this format if you are struggling.
Yeah, it's not that those. I feel like it's not that those archetype headlines are misleading, but they're the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more underneath that, like, just being like, I'm an Eerie deck is like, yeah, but like, are you aggressive? Are you controlling? Do you have some sort of combos happening? I had a really cool choice the other day. I was drafting a blue black deck one of the first times, and it was early in the pack or early in pack one, maybe pick 6, and I had the choice between Nashi, the blue black menace 2-drop, and Fear of Infinity, the 1 blue black enchantment, the signpost uncommon. And normally I would think I would want Nashi in the deck, but I already had Entity Tracker, the thing that draws off of enchantments, and I had the Cadaver Lab, the uncommon room that combos with Fear of Infinity. So I was like, oh, I think I actually, like, in a vacuum, you want Nashi, but I think actually with these synergies that I have going on in this blue black deck, I would rather have Fear of Infinity, and it paid dividends in the actual gameplay.
Well, and the other thing that's insane with Fear of Infinity is Final Vengeance. That's not just a red black card. Like
Right.
having
Yeah.
Fear of Infinity as a recursive piece to then throw away. I mean, yes, you're turning Final Vengeance into essentially like a blue black black, like a 4-mana removal spell. But
Hmm.
Final Vengeance, I cannot say enough good things about that card. I think it is the strongest black common. Like you have to do some work to make it that, but I think it is the most important black common.
But the thing about it is that I agree. Every black deck like needs that effect, and every black deck, if black is open, will have fodder for it. Whether you're playing Fear of Lost Teeth, whether you're playing the rats, whatever, like it should be fairly easy for you to have something to chuck away. It's a room you've already cashed in, whatever. Yeah, I agree.
Well, but I think I guess what I'm trying to get across is I think a mental shift for me regarding that card's power level, because usually
Mm,
I would want to pick up the fodder and then get my bone splinters later. And I think Final Vengeance is good enough that you're supposed to go after it and
yeah.
get the fodder later, or assume that your black deck will be able to make Final Vengeance work in some capacity.
Yeah, it's just such an important effect to have because of what you've already talked about, which is that, like, the bombs in the format plus the say its names and the cadavered lab defiled crypt stuff, like there's just so many ways to get things back that if you're not exiling it or trapping it in the screen or whatever, like you're just gonna see it again after you kill it.
Yeah. So, just to kind of give some examples here that I think are fairly straightforward, but I think worth talking about still. Let's say you get an optimistic scavenger early. That's the single white 1/1 that has an eerie trigger, put a +1/+1 counter on something. That card tells you want to be eerie. So you're going to start grabbing enchantments, right? But the next level is those other enchantments are going to want you to do things also. So let's say you get the grand entryway, the thing that makes a 1/1 glimmer and then puts a +1/+1 counter on 2 creatures. That card is atrocious if you don't have other board presence. But if you get Scavenger into that, or you have 2 creatures on the battlefield already when you draw that card, or you have other things besides Optimistic Scavenger that care about Eerie, that card's great. Elegant Rotunda, that thing. But its power level ranges widely depending on the cards you surround it with or what you play before it. So just having Optimistic Scavenger is not enough to get me interested in running that. But now once I've got maybe the blue white uncommons that maybe I'm pooping out 1/1 gremlins whenever I'm playing my Elegant Rotunda also, then those cards start to go up in value. So just thinking about where your best cards are asking you to go and how you can surround them with cards that support them.
I
And
also
that's going to lead you towards blue white Tempo aggro, which is one of the most obvious, I think, powerful decks in the format, but I've gotten myself in some trouble with not supporting the support cards, right? Like having too many, I was like, great, Elegant Parlor, whatever, make these 1/1 Eerie things, but then ultimately you're just falling behind. You've got to do more work than just that plus Optimistic Scavenger.
I mean, the next card on your list here is Smoky Lounge Misty Salon, which is the blue-red uncommon room. Smoky Lounge adds red, and your first main phase to cast or unlock rooms, and Misty Salon makes an XX flyer equal to the number of unlocked rooms you control. This is such an interesting card, and I think Optimistic Scavenger less extremely so, but like you need to like check all the boxes for this card. I had a blue-red deck the other day that had 3 of these, but then only 2 other rooms.
And so they're not good cards then,
so
right?
then they're not good cards.
Yeah. So I think Smoky Lounge Misty Salon has the widest power level of any card in the format.
Yes, totally agree. But the thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about Optimistic Scavenger is there's also a something you need to understand. Like talking about blue-white, Tempo is the best home for Optimistic Scavenger. That's obvious. But it's not like that it's a blue-white gold card. It can do work in other decks. It can be, I played against a friend of mine in a draft in paper this week, and he had 2 Optimistic Scavengers in a great black-white deck that wasn't Reanimator, that was basically black-white Eerie with Optimistic Scavenger. He was making it work there. I have had Optimistic Scavenger in Boros decks that is great, and you have like 6 rooms and you're doing the thing and you've got Glimmer Lights and whatever. If you're going down a path, let's say Optimistic Scavenger is an early pick for you, you're trying to optimize it, you identify red-white as what you should be drafting in your seat, you're going to have a point where you're like, you might have a point, I should say, in the draft where you go, I need to stop building around Optimistic Scavenger. I need to stop making picks that are swaying my deck towards maximizing this and maximize my deck towards being Boros aggro. And that is also what makes drafting this format so fun and interesting, is those little decision points as well.
And maybe, yes, for sure. I've had that same experience where I'm like, okay, I could put this in red-white. Then I'm like, okay, red-white's really flowing. Maybe I'm not doing the scavenger thing. But then maybe you get a second scavenger and you're like, okay.
Right, then the pendulum swings back. Yeah.
And all of a sudden we're taking Glassworks over Scorching Dragonfires.
Exactly, yeah.
All day, But I think Smoky Lounge Misty Salon, too, is tricky. This is why the Rooms deck is such a high ceiling, but such a high fail rate also, because you have to have multiples of the Smoky Lounge Misty Salon, I think, plus a bunch of other good rooms, plus good cheap interaction to not die. And if any one of those ingredients is missing, it really does fall flat. But if you get all of those ingredients, boy, howdy, have you cooked up a delicious meal.
For sure. Talk to me about threats around every corner.
This is another powerful card in the format, and this one wants you to manifest dread, right? Like that, it says it on the card. You're going to be rewarded for manifesting dread, and you're going to be getting lands to help you flip the stuff up. So you should start prioritizing ways to manifest dread, obviously. But the other thing I think that's important to think about with it is it also gives you tons of mana. So cards that are good mana sinks start to go way up in value. It also turns on splashing in a pretty big way. This is one of the cards that will make me most likely to play a 4-color manifest dread deck or whatever. And that, along with dual lands, you just end up, once you play threats around every corner, I think most of the time, if you build your deck right, never missing a land drop. And then but one of the ways you can still lose is if you're flooding out and not having things to do with your mana. So starting to fit mana sinks or ways to spend your mana alongside the manifest dread stuff that threats around every corner is asking you to do.
Yeah, for sure. When you discover a new binge-worthy show, or a song that you play on repeat, or finally unlock the keys to an unexplored archetype, and you have to share it with your friends so they can experience just how awesome it is?
It's kind of what it feels like when you discover that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. It's such an awesome deal, there's no way you can keep it to yourself.
Friends don't let friends overpay for wireless. Say bye-bye to your overpriced wireless plan and switch to Mint Mobile.
$15 a month? That's less than the price of one abhorrent Oculus on Magic Online. It's so cheap!
Use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts.
All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network.
To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LOL.
That's mintmobile.com/LOL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LOL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on the unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
This next point is so good, and I mean that just because it has affected me so much. Like, try to avoid narrowing down as long as you can, unless you get a series of powerful cards early that all want you to do the same thing. So I feel like I have had this problem where I'm scared of one, the lack of power that I've seen, and so I'm trying to lock myself in to something too early, and that shuts me off from a potential lane down the road, whether that's a powerful card or just an obvious, sometimes you get things where the packs break a weird way, and like it isn't until pack 2 where a bunch of signposts in a specific color pair get opened, and then by that point nobody's in that deck, and so those cards are whipping around the table. And if I haven't latched onto something powerful and I see that going around, I'm like, dang, is there some way I could have set myself up to be open to that? That's one thing to do. But the flip side is knowing when you have that powerful start of something worth sticking to. I had a draft the other day where I went Entity Tracker pick 1 into Optimistic Scavenger pick 2. And I was like, you're going to have to pry these cards from my cold, dead hands. Like, I am not moving off of Blue-White Eerie at this point. And I would not advise people to be that locked in that early to a deck, but the combination of that being a color pair that I think is supported enough at common that you can do that even if it's contested, plus how powerful those two cards are and how clearly they want to be doing the same thing, I think it's important to know that side of the coin as well, of like, when do you have stuff that's good enough to lock in so early?
Well, you had talked about wanting to get deep into one color, and I think this sort of ties into trying to avoid locking in, is knowing where each color pushes you, alongside kind of some updated color power rankings, or just the idea that how you have the colors ranked in this format like drastically influences which archetypes you're going to end up in most often. So for me, I think I actually prioritize red and green the most. Like, I think we had said red, blue, white, green, black in previous episodes and not many updates. I think the more I've been drafting, the more for me it is red 1, green 2, and almost green 1, just because I keep, not to rub it in, but I keep opening great cards. And I think red is the default route when you don't open great cards, is to try to get into red. But I think if you do open great cards, green is much safer, because green wants the game to go a little bit longer. It's going to care about the graveyard. It's going to care about splashing. It's going to care about delirium. It's going to be great at recurring bombs. I think green is the color that allows you to stay open the longest and pick up powerful cards that other people are passing most frequently. Like, you're most frequently able to take advantage of a late bomb in pack 2 or pack 3 when you are base green.
I'm like low key fighting with green right now. Like, I'm
No,
like,
which is wild to me. I think
like,
we should talk about it.
I'm divorced from green right now. Like, I just don't. This happened on stream, so it's public information. But I will say it. I forget, there were a handful of green cards in the pack. One of them was Bookworm, and I said some obscenities to that card, and then I took Sporogenic Infection, pack 1, pick 1 instead. That's the one in a black enchantment that enchants a creature. Your opponent has to sack a creature that isn't that creature, and then that creature has if it gets dealt damage clause, it dies. Which is not a correct pick, like in terms of power level of cards. I recognize that. But for me, in that moment, and I might say even today, though I drafted yesterday and I had my sort of like green hangover a little bit, and I halfway through the draft, I was like, I could probably try drafting green again. It's just hard for me because I have not won with green decks like almost at all in the format. Like, sure, red green aggro when red is the base color, sure, I can win with that, but like by and large, when I'm trying to do like green late game splashy stuff, the decks do not play well for me. So I'm low key personally trying to avoid it a little bit until I can figure it out.
Yeah, I think I would co-sign when I go deep off the rails and I'm playing 4 or 5 colors. Generally, it does not work out. But when I'm playing a good 2-color pair, like base black green splash blue or base red green splash black, like in the Jund Sultai color area, and I'm 2 base colors plus 1 splash, generally those decks are really powerful if they've got a lot of rares in them. And I think certainly fine though too. Like I think that's the interesting thing about this format is that the format's deep enough and balanced enough that you could pretty much say, I don't want to mess with that stuff. Like, for example, for me, I've been valuing red and green pretty highly. So it's been near impossible for me to get into black white or black red. Like, occasionally I'll be red black, but red black base red isn't really red black. It's a lot more aggro-y than it is sacrifice synergies, and that's how my red black decks end up because I start heavy red and then I pick up the black gold cards or whatever, and you just have pretty high card quality rather than having sacrifice synergies. But I think if you, for example, what you're talking about, like if you wrote off green, once you start down base black, it's way easier to end up in sacrifice synergy decks or reanimator because that's what black does, and I think it does it well enough to compete with the other decks.
Yeah, that's the thing is like I mean obviously I know I'm giving a power level on that specific pick or whatever, but I just don't I'm just not interested in playing green at the moment, specifically because I also feel like it's contested. Like I feel like people are pretty high on green, or the pods I've been in have been high on green. That like I also find that when if I start with a bookworm or whatever, that I might find that it's being fought over, and I don't quite know. I don't have my sea legs with that color and in that situation to know, like, how do I pivot? How do I maximize? What do I do? Do I stick to this? Do I jump ship? Whatever. I feel so much more confident in the other four colors that I'm just like, I'm just going to stick with those for now.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think white of all the colors is the color I prefer starting the least because I feel like it gives me the least agency over the draft, and I feel like there's tons of edge to be gained in the draft. The white decks are great when they come together, like white red, white blue. Sign me up. Like I would love piloting premium versions of those decks all day, every day. They are significantly less fun to draft, though. I've found, and a lot of times, especially if you're starting with white cards, you're crossing your fingers and you're like, well, I hope I don't get cut. Like I definitely haven't figured out yet how to pivot out of white into some
Mhm.
other functional deck because once you start white, the best white decks are aggro. And if aggro's cut, ending up with a mediocre aggro deck is a pretty rough place to be in this format because you lose to the good aggro decks and you lose to the good other decks.
Well, and not to like commons, obviously, whatever in the play booster era, they matter less, or they're just it's a different impact than before. But it's hard to not think about it in terms of getting deep into a color and thinking about and reflecting on the commons. When you think about red and all of what red's commons are doing, they're all inherently working together, and then all can port into basically whatever second color you get, with like the exception of I feel like red blue. Red blue has a specific like you're doing the rooms thing. You want the cards that support rooms. You're not particularly interested in being aggressive. Like you're not loving most valuable Slayer in your red blue rooms deck, etc. But red green, red black, red white, you can just be red aggro with the other color supporting. White, the commons are doing so many disparate things. You're like, am I beat down? Am I eerie? Am I reanimator? And there's like you've got your possessed goats and your acrobatic cheerleaders and your elegant rotundas, and like yeah, some of those could go in the same decks together, but not really. And so it's just a tougher package to come together.
Yes, and I think blue, being the last color we haven't really talked about yet, is a super flexible support color, but it's a tough base color. I have not started heavy blue often. I
Hmm.
think if you did, it leaves you open to all four blue decks, but I still think you're hoping to not be base blue. Like my green blue decks are definitely base green,
Mm-hmm.
like 100%. Blue white decks are base white. Like that's where I think the good threats are for the good blue white tempo decks. Like blue doesn't offer you a ton of premium eerie threats. And then blue red, like maybe rooms is the deck that's most base blue. And blue black, I just don't have much experience with. I have not, again, because I've been generally steering towards red or green first. Blue black's a deck I'm not going to end up in very often.
Yeah, I had a really good blue black deck yesterday, but I think that might have been the first time. That was like I started with Entity Tracker, and then the next pick was so bleak. I took Skull Snap Nuisance just as a like, well, like if this is open, cool, and I haven't drafted this. And then that was the draft where I got then Defiled Crypt Cadaver Lab, then got the Fear of Infinity later, and that deck ended up being excellent. But that was sort of a like, I kind of shrugged and took a card, and then it ended up working out. But the thing I'll say about base blue is that I think the thing that excites me about blue is Unable to Scream. Just getting a like super premium removal spell at common that is synergistic depending on and doesn't have to be, but can be synergistic depending on if you've got some eerie stuff. That's what makes me so like fine to start heavy blue, is that I feel like you get that stuff, and then like whatever, then you get the fears at uncommon, the counterspell fear that then your opponent manifests, the fear of isolation that picks up a room or whatever. Like those are really strong cards to get at uncommon.
Yeah, but certainly blue's got some banger uncommons. I would agree there, yeah. But again, what you value highly, I think says a lot about where you end up. And it's cool that you can be drafting the format and avoiding green and having success, and I can be drafting green a lot and having success. Like all of that says this format is very good and very deep to me.
Yes, I totally agree.
All right, so let's get into a log to discuss these ideas instead of talking about them in the abstract quite so much. So this is one of my drafts. Pack one, pick one. See the following cards as options. At common, there's a Terramorphic Expanse, the basic land, fetch land. There's a Say Its Name, 1 and a green for the sorcery, mill 3 cards, and you can return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. And if you've got 3 of them, you can Beetlejuice out Altenac the Thrice Called. And then we quickly go on to the uncommons. There's an Oblivious Bookworm, your favorite. Blue-green for a 2/3. At the beginning of your end step, you can draw a card. If you do, discard a card unless a permanent entered the battlefield face down under your control this turn, or you turned a permanent face up. And then there's not a lot of other great cards. There's a Vile Mutilator, 5 black for a 6/5 flying trample. As an additional cost to cast it, you sack a creature and an enchantment, and when it enters, each opponent sacrifices a non-token enchantment, then sacrifices a non-token creature. And then there's also Exercise, 1 and a white for a sorcery. Exile target artifact, enchantment, or creature with power 4 or greater. Before we get into this pack, talk to me about Vile Mutilator, because I still am kind of high on this card, but I also have yet to see it cast or cast it myself.
What? How? You've yet to see it cast?
Yet to see it cast, and I have played a lot of Magic.
I know
it's not like I haven't been playing this format.
That's wild. I think it. I mean, it's very impactful. 7 mana is a lot. I'm not like. I would be hard pressed, I think, for this to ever be the first black card I took in a draft.
Is this a black-white only card, though? That's the part I'm sketchy on. Are you just playing this in a black deck where the game might go long?
Like, wouldn't you play this in a black-green deck?
Probably not. My black-green decks have generally been lower curve.
Huh, okay. Well, that's probably one of my many mistakes with drafting green decks. Vile Mutilator, I don't know if you're just trying to reanimate it. I think like there are ways you can build like red-black decks where you're just casting this. You know, like where you're just, because that's one of the things red-black does so well is like it just draws a lot of cards and 1-for-1s with a ton of creatures that like getting to 7 mana isn't that crazy.
But this isn't pulling you into black, right?
No.
Okay.
That's what I said. I would never. This would never be my first black card.
Okay.
I'm glad you shouted out Exercise, and we should say that this is a great Ethan pack because you've opened a rare land, Flood Farm Verge, that taps for white and then blue.
So yes, a bad rare, but Bookworm is an A. Like I feel like I opened a bomb.
Yeah, but I'm glad you do. I don't, because I don't know what I'm gonna do with this card, and I don't feel like I'm gonna win with it. But I'm glad that you feel that way. I'm glad you shouted out Exercise too, because that card has gotten me many times this week. Just it's very efficient. It exiles. It exiles.
Right? It says exile on it.
This card is good. This is main deckable good, I think. Yeah, I mean, you take Bookworm out of this pack. If I was on my rant against green the other day, I would take Terramorphic Expanse, but I don't actually think that's a good behavior. So I take Bookworm here.
Okay. We got a Bookworm, pack 1, pick 1. Next pick, you see the following cards as options. There's Scorching Dragonfire, 1 and a red for an instant, deals 3 to target creature or player. If that creature or player, Planeswalker, would die this turn, exile it instead. There's also, we should shout out Glimmerlight and talk about Glimmerlight. So this is 2 mana for an artifact. When it enters, create a 1/1 white glimmer enchantment creature token. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and an equip cost of 1. I think both you and I were super hot on this card going into the format, and I thought it was good, but it's just gone way down in my pick order because they just fly around the table in most drafts.
Yeah, you don't have to take it highly, you mean? I mean, it's an excellent card. But that's the other really great thing about it, and it's why I think this is, I mean, still for me, front runner for Golden Egg Award winner. Like, it's great in a lot of spots, and then there's still spots that I cut it. There's still times where I'm not playing it. I don't think it's an auto include as many as you can in any deck. Like, there are definitely decks where you're like, I don't want this, or there's decks where you're like, I have 3, I'm only going to play 2. Like, but it's just such a good card.
Yeah. Another card in this pack that has gone up that I don't think is in consideration here, but we should shout out. Derelict Attic, 2 and a blue. When you unlock the door, draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. And Widow's Walk, 3 and a black. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+0 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. You're going to talk about this card in Red-Black Sacrifice later, but this card just in general has gone up for me. This is a black common that I think was flying under the radar that can do a lot of different things in the format.
Well, and one of the great things about it is the wheel is alive currently with it. And that's really great to have a card that you can get pick 9, pick 10, that you don't have to prioritize, that you're like, oh, this actually does fill a hole that my deck needs and add some synergy, etc. We'll talk about it in red black, but I think the points I'll make will stand for many black decks.
Yeah, other things too, like in green black too, just having it to give green black card advantage to kind of keep pace with the blue decks. And maybe you got this in tandem with Under the Skin, our preview card that mills 2, lets you manifest red, and then rebuy a permanent. So you've maybe sacrificed it to another black card and then rebought it with that. Like this can really be an engine piece in black decks that want to grind, because black decks have ways to get into the graveyard, and then there's potentially ways to pick it back up as well.
Yeah.
All right, so really, though, truly, Scorching Dragonfire is the only common in consideration. I guess we should shout out Twist Reality for the purposes of our discussion here, because this is 1 blue instant, choose 1 counter target spell, manifest dread. Because armed with everything we said, Bookworm says, well, you want me to manifest dread? Twist Reality says manifest dread. I should take that here. Like, I think that's an easy train of thought to fall down, especially after Bloomborough, because once you picked a thing, you wanted to pick another thing. But the power level gaps here still really matter. And I don't think Twist Reality is in consideration over Dragonfire.
Yeah.
Even though it matches up with Bookworm and the synergy that Bookworm wants you to have.
Yeah, I would almost rather just take Glimmerlight out of this pack, because it's like, whatever. It's fail cases fine paired with Bookworm versus taking Twist Reality. And I think Twist Reality is playable for sure, but...
And then there's several uncommons that are all fine, but none that really go well with Bookworm. There's Wildfire Wickerfolk, that's the red-green 3/2 haste. There's Fear of Infinity, that's the blue-black 2/2 flying lifelink that can't block. There's a Skull Crab, that's the 0/3 that has Eerie Mill. And then Glimmer Seeker, 2 and a white for the 3/3 survival. If it does, you make a Glimmer, and if you've already got a Glimmer, you draw a card.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pack that I understand, because there's a Scorching Dragonfire, and that's the best card here, and that's what I'm going to take.
Yeah, Scorching Dragonfire is great, and I think you're fine to move off Bookworm at this point. Like, you're going down either direction. Pretty unlikely that both of them make your deck at this point, but
really,
certainly if you end up base green, Teamer Rooms, Teamer Manifest Red has been strong. Yeah,
okay, yeah. That's why I feel like it's a cool pick, because you're like, these two cards could go together. I feel like you're right. It's more likely that you pick one of them, but there's still whatever 20-25% chance at this point that they both make your deck.
Yeah. All right, moving on to pack 1, pick 3. See the following cards as options. There's Moldering Gym, 3 mana, search your library for basic land, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle, and then Weight Room, 6 mana, manifest red, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. There's also the actual card, Manifest Red, 1 and a green, 2 Manifest Red. And then Murder, which is, I think, just generally a bad card in this format. 1 black, instant destroy target creature. Final Vengeance is just infinitely better than Murder.
Yep.
And then there's Twist Reality again, which I don't think is good enough to be in consideration here. And then an uncommon, Duskmourn's Domination, the 4 blue enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets -3, -0, and loses all abilities, and you control it.
This is an interesting pick, because I'm actually not sure what I would take in this spot. And I'm curious about your selection here. So you selected Moldering Gym. If I was going to push down the green path here, I would think that Manifest Red is better than Moldering Gym Weight Room, like 10 out of 10 times in this spot. Can you talk to me about why you selected Moldering Gem?
Yeah, I don't particularly like Manifest Dread, even in the Manifest Dread decks. I would prefer my Manifest Dreading to come from uncommons, and right now, I don't have a very high power level. And one of the things when I'm drafting green that I try to do is leave myself open to play whatever good cards I see. And Moldering Gym helps me do that. Manifest Dread does not, I think. And then once I have Moldering Gym, I'm more willing to take 5 drops, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives me the late game manifest still to go along with the bookworm. I feel like it's towing the line between it also helps me play the Dragonfire that I've already got. Like I'm gonna have to pick up fixing at some point if I want to do that. Might as well do it now out of a weak pack, that kind of thing.
So Manifest Dread as a card is probably just better to think about as, I feel like it's better in like delirium aggro as a like 2 mana 2/2 that enables half delirium or whatever.
Correct. Like basically the only time I'm interested in Manifest Dread is if I've got tons of bookworm type cards that are paying me off,
Uh-huh.
or I want types for delirium.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so took the Moldering Gym there. Moving on to pack 1, pick 4. See the following cards as options. Basically, there's one.
Yeah.
There's a threats around every corner. It's 3 and a green. When it enters, you manifest dread, and whenever a face down permanent enters, you can search up a basic land and put it onto the battlefield tap. There's nothing else you would possibly take out of this pack in this spot.
It's so interesting. So I talked about that draft, the blue-white draft I had, where I started with Entity Tracker, then Optimistic Scavenger, and I feel like I have this like there's a sound effect that happens in my head in these drafts where you're like it's like a ding or a lock or whatever that happens where you're like, this is what I'm doing. This is the decision. And this threats around every corner of this pack feels like boom, decision. I've got Bookworm, I've got threats, we're cooking, we got maybe a thing we want to splash, we're good. You're going to have actually a few more of those picks in this draft, which is what makes this draft so interesting. But that's what it feels like right now that you're like, cool, threats around every corner, doing it locked for green based Manifest Dread.
Yes, that's certainly what I'm feeling in the moment. Pack 1, pick 5, though, all of a sudden alarm bells are going off. We see a pack with 0 green cards left in it.
Uh-huh.
And the best cards are red aggro cards. There's still a most valuable Slayer here. The 3 and a red 2/4, give an attacking creature +1/+1 first strike. And in the uncommon slot, there's still Arabella. Red, white for a 1/3. Whenever it attacks, deals X damage each opponent, you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control, power 2 or less.
Yeah. Arabella is nutso. I would take it here and speculate on it. But I would still be hoping that this pack was a fluke for some reason. Like, I would be hoping to probably not jump off of the base green train that you have. But these are 2 different decks at this point. Arabella plus Dragonfire going in a red-white deck, and then Threats, Gym, and Bookworm going in a green deck.
Correct. But I think that's an important skill to have in this format, especially early in pack 1, because sometimes you do see, and again, we don't have no rares yet, but I feel like very powerful cards to this point, and we want to make sure we're open to Arabella if that's what ends up being open in our seat.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to pack 1, pick 6, Pendulum flips back the other direction. So you see a Cryptid Inspector, 2 and a green for a 2/3 Vigi. Whenever something gets turned face up, you get a +1/+1 counter on Cryptid Inspector. And then there are some cards for red-white. There's a Vicious Clown, the 2 and a red 2/3. Gets +2/+0 when a creature power 2 or less enters. But really, we want to still continue down blue-green, I think, given the information we have. Now, if this pack had some more premium red and white cards, maybe we'd jump ship. But Cryptid Inspector is so important to the Manifest Red deck that I don't think you can pass it here. It is kind of most valuable Slayer power levels for Manifest Red as MVS is to aggro.
Ooh, that's a nice take. I like it.
So take the Cryptid Inspector here, pack 1, pick 6. Pack 1, pick 7, I have no idea what's happening here. So there is a Clockwork Percussionist still in the pack, the monkey. Red for the 1/1 haster. When it dies, you look at the top card, and you can play it until the end of your next turn. There's Fear of Surveillance. That's the 1 white 2/2 Vigi. When it attacks, you surveil 1. And burying the lead in the uncommon slot, there's another Arabella.
I mean, you kind of feel a little sick to your stomach, right? Because like you're in the dreaded like drafting 2 decks territory at this point. And I feel like the second Arabella, like before this, you're like 10% to play red white, right? Like you got the Cryptid Inspector, you got two threats plus Bookworm versus Arabella as like the powerful reasons to do each of the two decks. Arabella swings the pendulum back to where it's like, now it's 50-50. Maybe even because you're seeing Arabella so much later, right? Like, let's remember, you pack one, pick one Bookworm, so no one passed you that. The only powerful thing you've been passed that goes in the deck is threats around every corner, and you've now been passed two Arabellas, so now the pendulum probably swings to red-white being the more likely deck you end up in.
I think it's like 60-40 red-white.
That's not I don't love that. I don't love
I
throwing away
agree, because I wanted to play
picks.
my cool Oblivious
Yeah.
Bookworm, threats around every corner deck, but it's not the way it panned out. Pack 1, pick 8, and I think this pack seals the deal. There's just no green or blue cards that you want in the pack, and there's still Glimmerlight, there's still Vicious Clown, there's still Hardened Escort, and I did take Hardened Escort, and I did end up drafting red-white.
As the resident Boros expert on the podcast, I must say that you should take Glimmerlight, pick 8 there. Hardened Escort just doesn't really matter.
It's so good with Arabella.
Arabella's just so good with Arabella.
I guess Glimmerlight's so good with Arabella too.
Yeah. It's just a good card. I mean, this isn't like an egregious mistake or anything. You didn't take Vicious Clown, but
Wow.
And Vicious Clown is fine, but like Vicious Clown, you can get like pick 17. Like that, people just rip up that card and throw it in their trash when it gets passed to them.
Sure.
Yeah, really cool draft there of like just like the ping pong going back and forth from green to red white to green to red white.
But I think that, to me, that's how to draft this format is take the good cards, follow the good cards. If you stop seeing things, take another good card, try to follow it, figure out, just follow the cards.
I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit with some just specific cards, and then we can talk about Rakdos at the end here.
Yeah, let's do.
So I had a blue-red rooms deck this week that was really sweet. Short-lived, unfortunately. Spoiler for folks on YouTube. Also, thanks for everybody who's watching all the YouTube content. I'm dropping a lot of draft videos on there, which is
it's not a we effort, it's a you effort.
Well, it's just like I'm not really able to stream that much, and so feel like the content I can actually like do well and grow is on YouTube. So that's what I'm focusing on. Anyway, so I had a really sweet blue-red rooms deck. And 2 copies of Paranormal Analyst, which is the one in a blue, 1/3. Whenever you manifest red, you basically get to just draw the card that you don't manifest. And we've been talking about how we didn't love that in blue-green, and I do think it's really good in blue-red, actually, in a deck that's happy to have a defensive 2-mana 1/3 body. And you can get Ticket Booth and Slimy Aquarium fairly late. Those are the red and blue common rooms. I feel like Underwater Tunnel / Slimy Aquarium you get less late, but like both of those are rooms that manifest dread, and so it lets you affect the board while having a room, while being synergistic with Paranormal Analyst. So I think that's just something to keep in your back pocket if you're drafting that deck.
This next one took me a second when I read it in our show notes. Popular Egotist, which is the 2 and a black, 3/2, and you can pay 1 and a black to sacrifice a creature and enchantment to drain and gain, while also giving Popular Egotist indestructible, and then you have to tap the Egotist. Plus Sheltered by Ghosts, which is the 1 and a white enchantment that Oblivion rings something and then gives your creature ward 2 +1/+0 and lifelink.
Yeah, the wombo combo just is that it's an indestructible creature to put your Sheltered by Ghosts on. And like,
okay.
I had played this. I had a really sweet soupy Mardu Sacrifice deck the other day that had another card on this list, Jolly Balloon Man. We don't talk about rares very often, but probably should. That's the sort of Kiki Jiki variant. 1 red, white, 1/4 with haste, and you pay 1 tap it to copy a creature at sorcery speed, and then you sacrifice it in your end step. Finally had that in like a deck with a bunch of death triggers. So I had Fear of Lost Teeth, I had Clockwork Percussionist, and that really pops off with Jolly Balloon Man because you get those triggers, plus you're sacrificing the thing, so it triggers your Popular Egotists, whatever. But just having so much sack fodder with Popular Egotist and being able to protect the creature that you're putting Sheltered by Ghosts on, I found that really powerful. I mean, sure, if they have exile removal, you're getting got, but other than that, you're keeping that thing trapped by the ghosts for sure.
The next one is Flesh Burrower. This is the 1 and a green 2/2 Death Touch. And I agree. I just, it's hard for me to put it in my decks, but every time it's on the battlefield, I'm like, God, that card's annoying. I'm going to have to spend a removal spell on it or jam a 4/4 into it or something. Like, just always trades for something.
That's the thing is, like, you see it, you're like, I'm going to have to 1-for-1 with this. at some point, and sometimes it's doing like more annoying things, like the attacking and giving something else death touch. That matters. That comes up. So yeah, I'm not saying this card is like good or a high pick or anything, or I am saying it's good. I'm not saying it's a high pick, but I have been impressed by it.
I'm not giving it good. I'm giving it annoying.
Okay,
That's the
that's that's the
the label
highest you'll
from me.
go.
Yeah.
It's an A for annoying.
Next up is Fear of Isolation. This is 1 and a blue for the 2/3 flyer, and this goes back to powerful cards to build around, like that kind of concept we were talking about earlier in the episode. I think it's easy to fall in the trap of putting this in your 2-drop slot, and it is definitely not a 2-drop.
Right.
And the other thing that's unobvious about it, like, yes, you want things to pick up, but the other thing you want is ways to not fall behind. So you want Unable to Scream, or you want other good 2-drops that you can trade off. And once you have Fear of Isolation, good rooms go way up in value. And the other thing that's really nice with it is reusable enchantments like Shard Mage's Rescue. So protect a creature once, pick it up with Fear of Isolation, and then have it up again. And your opponent's just like, okay, great. My next removal spell's turned off too. So I think Fear of Isolation is a really cool card, really powerful card. But again, lots of very subtle things you can do to keep juicing the power level higher.
Next on this list is Norrin, Swift Survivalist. We have to talk about this card every week, I guess. The single red 2/1 can't block, and your blocked creatures, you can choose to exile them and then cast them in your second main phase.
Yeah, I don't think we explicitly said, like, this was a mover up for me because of this interaction, but I don't think we said it this explicitly. It's gross with Arabella, right?
Like,
you get to attack,
get the trigger, and then they block Arabella, whatever, you exile it and recast it. Yeah, that is insane.
Norrin is just great. Like, it is a pull into red almost. Like, it goes into B- territory for me.
I really don't agree with that. But my experience has been, that it's largely just a 1 mana 2/1, which is fine. I would take Clockwork Percussionist over Norrin every time.
Wow.
Yeah,
I would never do that.
Okay.
But I think you're also playing red-black. Like, Norrin's basically a red-white. Like, if you're valuing that highly, it's basically a red-white gold card, I think. The other thing it does is it rebuys triggers on a Reverent Gremlin for you. Like, it just gives your red deck, while being a card that your red deck wants, which is a 1 mana 2/1, it also gives it grind in the late game. Like, Norrin's not dead when you draw it on turn 8 or whatever, which is incredible for a 1 mana 2/1 for an aggro deck, I think. And then just cards with good ETBs go way up too. Think Fear of Burning Alive. Like, you're doming your opponent from 4. Like, they've either got to kill the Norrin or they've got to kill the Fear of Burning Alive. It just gives you late game inevitability while also providing early pressure. And I think all that is a ton from a 1-drop.
Yep.
We've shouted this stuff out before too, but Painter Studio and Defaced Gallery, just as a thought for, like, this is a powerful card. How do I go about maximizing it? The giving your attacking creatures +1/+0, Clockwork Percussionist goes way up. You want to keep your curve low so that you can cast the cards from the Painter Studio when you exile the top 2 cards of your library. It's absolutely bonkers with Midnight Mayhem, which is the red, white, gold card that then instead of 1/1 attacking haste, menace, lifelink, you've got 2/1s that are attacking. Just that sort of stuff to be on the lookout for, which again is not like earth-shattering news, but if you're not approaching the format that way of, like, good card, what does my good card ask of me? What other cards can I surround my good cards with to pull their value up? I really think that will drastically open up some doors for you in the format. Rim pun not intended.
And the last card on this list is Insidious Fungus, the single green 1/2 that you can pay to sack it, choose 1, destroy an artifact, an enchantment, or draw a card and hit an additional land drop that turn. Talk to me about this card, Mr. Green.
It's good. I think, and it's fine. You definitely want to be packing disenchant effects in green, but the cool thing about Insidious Fungus is it hits artifacts also. And some of the other ones only hit enchantments, or they're just, the thing about Insidious Fungus that I think is the best is you can rebuy it. Or it's kind of almost toolboxy in that if you mill it, then you can get it back with Say Its Name. Insidious Fungus and Say Its Name are best friends. Like, that recursion threat is really, really, really strong.
Yeah, if it's relevant, having that as a way to buy back that effect is really good. I buy it for sure. I figured out Rakdos and I want to talk about it. So this deck, I'd wanted to get into it. Obviously, I am predisposed to like the sacrifice decks in any format, whether they are good or bad. I think this one is actively good. And I think there's a lot of perhaps unintuitive or overperformer things that I wanted to shout out if folks haven't had a chance to draft the deck.
Well, the other thing that's really cool about this, it's perfect for you also because you can't open rares, one, but two, because it uses undervalued cards very well. Like
Yes.
you're very reliably going to get the pieces for the deck or key pieces for the deck on the wheel, which is a really powerful thing to be able to leverage in draft. I very first had inroads to true Rakdos Sacrifice, like where I started black and as a result wanted to be more sacrificey, and I popped up in the show notes and was consulting this guide as I was going. It was great.
Nice. Love it. See it in action. Well, and I shared these thoughts with. It was great. I opened up Magic Online the other day because I think Magic Online makes for perhaps some tougher sells as content, but in terms of getting really good reps, I love to play on there. Open up Magic Online, and you love to see Beers SC just at the top of the trophy leaderboard. I think he's like in third or second right now. And he was on my stream the other day talking. He's like, hey, man, I just can't make Rakdos work or whatever. And I feel like I finally figured it out. And I just wanted a place to like jot down my thoughts to then get them in show notes. So I opened up a Discord chat with Beers, send him the thing. And then he was like, all right, I'm forcing Rakdos. And like, da-da-da-da-da-da. He trophied with the deck. He figured it out. Like, he was like, I think you're onto something. So, okay. So the deck, low curve, tons of velocity. Disturbing Mirth really like tells you what the deck wants to do. I was watching Darkest Mage top 8 at a limited RCQ on Magic Online yesterday, and he referred to Disturbing Mirth as Muldrifter. And I was like, oh yeah, that is what it is. This is the black-red signpost. When it enters, you sack something, you draw 2 cards, and then when you sacrifice it, you manifest Dread. And so obviously a lot of work to get your Muldrifter on, but in this deck, it should be pretty easy to do so. So it gives you a clue what you want to do. Sacrifice energy, but draw cards. The deck gets tons of removal in red and black. And so having card advantage from Disturbing Mirth, and we'll talk about Derelict Attic as well, lets you get ahead on resources while easily one-for-oneing with your opponent. And that's what you want to be doing.
Well, and the 2 removal spells you want are Scorching Dragonfire and Final Vengeance, right? Those are the cream of the crop because both of them exile. Dragonfire kills the small things. Final Vengeance kills the big things.
Yeah, and Betrayer's Bargain too. That's the uncommon. But if we're talking about just commons, but that's not all. There's like 7 other removal spells that the color pair has access to, and so even if you don't get Final Vengeance or Scorching Dragonfire, you're getting other stuff. Like this deck is playing, basically every Glasswork Shattered Yard it gets its hands on, and so like there's more removal for you as well.
So when you say low curve, you're not talking aggressive necessarily.
Correct.
Could have aggressive draws, but mostly you're trying to grind your opponent out.
Yes. Yeah. So I just mean that like because of how so many of the cards work, you just want your curve slanted low. Like you want as many cheap things to sacrifice to Disturbing Mirth as possible. You want, when you unlock Painter Studio, Deface Gallery, whatever, you want to be able to cast both things pretty easily the turn after, or that turn if you can, whatever, so you want your curve. You seldomly want 5 drops or higher in the deck. Those are pretty sparing spots you're going to free up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're a curve out beat down style deck. You can.
The deck's just very efficient.
Correct. Yeah, that's a good clarification. The 2/1 drops, Clockwork Percussionist and Fear of Lost Teeth, they are like the kindling for the deck that starts the fire, right? You cannot have too many of them, and they really boost up a lot of what your other cards are trying to do. For example, overperformers, Cracked Skull and Sporogenic Infection. Sporogenic Infection we've talked about. That's the Edict variant enchantment. I think that's just a good card, period. Like any black deck is playing Sporogenic Infection. It is very rare for that card to not just be a good removal spell. And I think that's not apparent to everybody. Cracked Skull is a true overperformer in this deck. The 2 and a black enchantment, and enchants a creature. You get to Thoughtseize your opponent, and then if the creature is dealt any damage, it dies. Like these cards being effect plus, now you have sack fodder because it's just an enchantment hanging around that you can sack to your Disturbing Mirth or whatever, your Popular Egotist, but also the combo with Fear of Lost Teeth that you can sack Fear of Lost Teeth, ping the creature that has this enchantment on it and kill it. That's also really important.
Cracked Skull is pretty cracked. I've come way up on that card this week. I've really enjoyed playing with it.
And it's another really interesting puzzle. It's an example of a card that you'll get pick 20, right? You just like never have to prioritize this. It's coming around on the wheel. And so you'll end up with a couple of them, 3 of them, and then figuring out how many do I run? Am I playing all 3? Am I playing 2? Am I playing 1? Am I playing none? And there are going to be scenarios where I feel like different answers are going to be correct.
Yeah, love it.
Derelict Attic, Widow's Walk. So this is the room, draw 2, lose 2, and then +1/+0 and Death Touch if you're only attacking with a single creature. This being like Disturbing Mirth Light as card advantage is important, right? You need your divinations in all forms, whether it's Painter Studio, Defiled Gallery, Derelict Attic, Disturbing Mirth, obviously. But Widow's Walk is low-key excellent because you give Fear of Lost Teeth Death Touch. And then either they trade with it and then you kill something. They're not going to do that. So usually what happens is you attack for 2, they let it through, and then you sack Fear of Lost Teeth post combat and kill whatever you want. And Menace also exists, right? The other signpost, the 1 black red 3/2, that has Menace. Giving a Death Touch or Menace creature Death Touch is huge. And then another overperformer on this list has Menace, and that's Hand That Feeds. This is the one in a red 2/2. And if you have Delirium, when it attacks, it gets +2/+0 in Menace. Delirium is like trivially easy to get in this deck. Like the creatures I'm shouting out are enchantment creatures and artifact creatures. Fear of Lost Teeth, Clockwork Percussionist, Piggy Bank, whatever. Like you're getting types in the bin pretty easily. You have instant and sorcery removal spells. You're happy to play Terramorphic Expanse and pick that somewhat highly because it triggers sacrifice stuff for your egotists. Like you're getting Delirium pretty easy, and giving this Death Touch is extra sweet. And having so much removal in these decks means that Menace threats are extra good.
Ooh, yeah, I like all that.
The big overperformer that I could talk about is the card Let's Play a Game. This card is real. This card is real and excellent. So this is the 3 and a black sorcery and uncommon. If you have Delirium, which you're going to have Delirium, that's why you're interested in this card, you get to choose all 3 of these modes. Creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. Each opponent discards 2 cards. Each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. Getting all 3 of this effect, and it's like I was trying to talk to you about this, maybe it was last week or whatever. I was like, where are we at on this card? Like, I've had this cast against me like 2 or 3 times, and it has felt brutal every time. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to finally put it in my decks. And this is the deck that really wants it. And one of the reasons, and this was from Beers, because I was talking to him about it, and then he was like, oh yeah, I wasn't main decking this, but I sided it in a lot, and I probably should have main decked it. All the 1-for-1 removal stuff is great, except when you face Boros. And they've got a bunch of X1s, and you're like, am I really using like my Scorching Dragonfire on your 1-mana 2/1? Is that what I really want to do? And then what do you do when they drop Midnight Mayhem? How do you deal with all those? This is how you deal with all of those. It also stops you from dying super early if you happen to have a slower draw. And then like discard 2 against the late game decks is oppressive. This card is really good. Don't sleep on it. It's very good in this deck.
My last draft, I was towing the line between black red and black white, and ended up black white, which was kind of sad because I had to cut my Let's Play games. I was jazzed to try this card out. The other thing I could see this card doing also is maybe you've got 5 mana and you've got a Fear of Lost Teeth and you've got Delirium and you do the -1/-1, and maybe you can Final Vengeance, sack the Fear of Lost Teeth, ping down an X2, kill a big thing. Like, I just think, yeah, I'm picturing the view you're describing, and it looks pretty good.
And I think people are hip to this, but Turn Inside Out, the +3/+0 trick that Manifest Dread, this plays extremely well with all the All-Star 1-drops, like both Fear of Lost Teeth and Percussionist. Like Fear of Lost Teeth can trade with a 5 toughness creature, and then you get a 2/2, and it's extra good at helping you enable Delirium, right? You play Turn Inside Out with one of the 1-drops, that's probably just getting you all 4 types right there.
I don't know if we can say hip anymore. If my students would tell me, if I say the word hip, my students would tell me that I'm losing aura. Are you on the aura, the wavelength of having aura and getting and losing aura?
Moving on to the underperformers.
Very demure, very mindful.
Boiler Bilge's Ripper is terrible. This is the 4 and a red 4/4 ETB's sack a thing, deal 2 to any target. It's just like so clunky. You don't care. Like you just don't care about any aspect of this. So I have played this enough in these decks thinking, oh, this is what you want. And again, it's a card you can get super late. So I would be like, yeah, I can slot this in, and it just never does anything exceptional. And Murder, black as a cost is a pretty big ask, since the deck's mana is split down the middle, right? Disturbing Mirth is black-red. You're playing black 1-drops. You're playing red 1-drops. Like, double pips are a tough ask, and you should just have infinitely better ways to interact in the deck. Like, for example, like I no joke think Cracked Skull is a better 3-mana play in this deck than Murder.
I'm here for that take for sure.
So yeah, if you haven't drafted Rakdos Sacrifice, hopefully this gives you a little clue into it. And there's just so much to like about this deck.
So, last question for you here. You're presumably starting black, probably, but don't have to, I guess. And what is pulling you into the deck? Is it just the lack of truly like no kappa, lack of seeing power, and then this is a good direction you can go down, so you truly just forge your way into it? Are there certain cards that are hooking you?
I mean, the main one is Disturbing Mirth, right? It's the classic starting deep in black or red, and then a pick 4, pick 5 Disturbing Mirth is what is the thing that makes me go, yep, would love to do this. But it also can just be the thing about it is that it's a collection of cards, and I feel like it's where I like black cards the best, and I feel like it's where a lot of black cards you can get late are the best. And so it does make me feel like, if I'm seeing some red cards, which is how I often start my drafts, is red cards, and get a Final Vengeance, that's already, I'm like, all right, it's not going to take much. I either need to see something powerful, which we all know I'm not going to see. So it's not going to take much past getting that, like a Final Vengeance or whatever, for me to go, okay, I can do that. Because usually by that point, you're almost at the wheel, and the wheel is where a lot of these cards show up anyway.
Okay, so a clearer way to ask this question. This is what the people really want to know. Is Red-Black Gumption back?
Ooh. I think it's not. That's what I think it's not.
No, that's not the answer I was hoping for.
I wish it was, because that would probably be what I would do every draft if I could. But I think this format is too good and too balanced for Red-Black Gumption to be back.
Oh, what a letdown to end the episode on.
Sorry.
I hate to hear it. That's okay.
I have to give the right answer.
This deck is sweet, and I am looking forward to trying it out for sure. This format is super fun. I think the truest testament to this format is I have a blast when I'm losing. Also,
yeah,
trying to do crazy wacky things, because I feel like I've got a puncher's chance with the crazy wacky decks, which is a very nice feeling to have.
Yeah, well, and it does feel like you've got, like, I got to try a thing that wasn't very good. I tried to do Walk-in Closet, didn't really make it work. That's the mythic rare that's like Crucible of Worlds room. Mm-hmm. Didn't really work out. But I've also faced it, and it did work out for my opponent. But I've also gotten other sweet mythics that I've built around and made work, and that's really fun. Like, there just feels like there's still so much to explore, and so much to explore for like each of us, because I do feel like we have like two halves of the format here from each of our experiences.
For sure. All right, great place to wrap us up. Thank you, as always, to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website at lordsoflimited.com. We've got our tier list, links to our episode backlog, our YouTube channel, our Twitch streams, respectively, our merch, courtesy of TeePublic, our Patreon page, of course. All that's available at lordsoflimited.com.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.